Welcome to Silent Chronicler. Tonight's Calm Chronicle takes us far from Earth, to the red stillness of Mars, where the sky is silent and nothing moves. You live here now, alone in a capsule built for one, light years from home, surrounded by dust, metal, and the memory of oceans you may never see again. There's no return mission, just the hum of oxygen systems, the quiet of the Martian dawn, and the slow unraveling of days that never change. And tonight, you wake up again, to the same sterile panel lights, the same log entry blinking for your response, and the same silence that never really leaves. If you're staying with me tonight, leave a like and subscribe. Tell me where you're listening from, and what time your night begins. No sunlight reaches through the dome. Only the memory of warmth remains, thin and crumbling at the edges like a fading photograph. And when you wake, it's not morning. It's another loop in a place that forgot what morning means. A place where time is not divided by light, but by duty. By oxygen cycles. By maintenance schedules that feel less like survival and more like theater. Performed for an audience too far to respond. The red dust outside never moves fast. Only drifts in the windless vacuum like a ghost too tired to haunt. And from your window, if you choose to look, you see a horizon so flat it swallows thought, a surface so endless it crushes your sense of direction. Because there is no direction, not really, only outward, only farther, only distance layered on distance. The earth is not visible, not even as a speck, and the voice you once knew on the other end of a call now comes through in recordings. Hours old, flattened by delay, emotion softened into data by time and distance alike. This is not exile. This is irrelevance. You were sent to be remembered, but distance erases attention. You are not forgotten. You are unreachable. And that is worse. Every object around you has a function, but no soul. Filtered air, recycled water, food made from processed protein and preserved for decades. You eat to move, not to taste. You sleep not because you're tired, but because the schedule says rest must come now. Sleep is a setting, not a surrender. And when you wake again, the light above does not warm you. It illuminates with the indifference of electricity, bright, blue-white, too clean, too clinical, too exact. Even the walls feel like mirrors. Not because they reflect, but because they give nothing back. You speak sometimes just to make sure your voice still fits in the air. You hum, not for pleasure, but to shake the silence, to fracture the vacuum. No one answers. The delay is too long. Even if they could respond, you wouldn't hear laughter in real time. Emotion becomes theoretical. There are no birds here, no trees, no uneven ground. Everything is planned, flat, safe, and in that safety lies the unbearable truth. Danger gave life color. Here, color is only pigment. The simulation of sky on your screen isn't blue because of air. It's blue because someone programmed it that way. That someone is gone now, not dead, just elsewhere, unreachable, like everyone else you once knew. You volunteered for this. Of course you did. All explorers do. But you didn't know that isolation isn't absence. It's a kind of presence that only grows heavier the longer it is carried. Every thought loops louder. Every fear finds more space to echo. You become the landscape. Empty, distant, still. And the worst part is not the silence. It's the knowledge that it won't end. Not because you'll die here, though you will, but because Mars doesn't change. Mars doesn't listen. Mars doesn't answer. The days bleed together, not in the way that lazy afternoons once drifted into evenings back on Earth, but in a mechanical blur, as though time has abandoned individuality and now only repeats itself in cold, perfect copies. Yesterday was today, and tomorrow will be identical unless something breaks, and secretly a part of you wishes something would, not out of recklessness but desperation for contrast, for interruption, for any deviation that proves existence isn't a perfectly sealed loop. Because when the environment never changes, the mind begins to shift, begins to stretch in unnatural directions, trying to invent meaning where none exists, hallucinating in thought, long before vision bends. And when you stare too long at the panel lights, you start assigning them emotion, as though the blinking yellow means boredom, or the occasional flicker in the oxygen indicator is anxiety. Because if the systems can feel, then maybe you aren't the only one alive in this place pretending to function. The mission logs demand routine entries, summaries of equipment, status, and personal well-being, and you type them faithfully. But the truth slips in at the edges, in the delay between words, in the way your fingers hesitate before you report stable, because the body is holding, yes, but the soul, if such a thing can stretch across this kind of distance, is beginning to ache from disuse. Nothing you say is truly heard. Not in the moment. Not with response. Not in a way that feeds the self. Words sent home arrive as artifacts, time-stamped, stripped of urgency. They aren't conversations. They're echoes thrown down a well so deep the return is never satisfying, and you begin to wonder whether the return even matters, or if you speak just to mark time, to count your own breath by syllables. The silence outside is not passive. It presses against the dome. It leans against your thoughts. It becomes a second atmosphere, weightless, yet dense. Every step you take across the habitat floor feels like a ritual enacted for no god, a dance of gestures that imitate purpose. But purpose fades here. It decays like organic matter without soil. Dreams come slower. Memory shifts from vivid to symbolic. You no longer see faces, only impressions of warmth, the shape of laughter, the color of voices you'll never hear again except in imagination, which has become your only companion, but even it grows thin under Martian gravity. And yet, you continue. Because continuing is the last thing that still belongs to you. The last thing Mars cannot replicate. The last thing Earth can no longer verify. Existence without witness. Consciousness without context. You are a mind, orbiting within a shell of routine, looking out across a world that never moves and wondering if stillness has always been this loud. You begin to measure the silence not in seconds, but in thoughts repeated. The same internal phrases looping back like comets through a sky without stars, each orbit tighter than the last, each return leaving a deeper groove in the mind, and not wear, but pattern, not collapse, but concentration, as if the absence of noise sharpens every internal frequency until you can hear the sound of your own blood as narrative, the sound of your breath as dialogue. And when you speak aloud now, not to logs, not to systems, just to space, your voice surprises you, not for what it says, but for how human it still sounds. Round and warm in a chamber built for function, not feeling. And for a moment it feels like companionship, until it stops. And the silence swells to reclaim what was briefly borrowed. The soil outside is always red, but it's not the color that matters. It's the texture, the way it powders under boot, the way it clings like memory, the way it looks the same no matter where you walk, no matter how far you go from the habitat. As if the planet refuses the idea of elsewhere, denies the fantasy of discovery, and when you collect samples now, it's not science, it's ritual. An act of devotion to the illusion that variety still exists. Inside, you touch the same handles, open the same panels, cycle the same air, and each time feels more symbolic than functional, like turning pages of a book you've memorized, knowing nothing new waits, but turning anyway because the act itself is what remains of meaning. Food carries no taste, only texture, and water tastes like past. Sleep doesn't come easily, not because of discomfort, but because dreams take time to warm up, like old engines that refuse to spark without memory. And memory is growing selective, not forgetful, just soft, rounded. The sharp lines of past relationships, past cities, past choices now glow with an indistinct kindness that feels almost merciful. You no longer remember why you volunteered. You only remember how it felt to say yes. A younger version of yourself wanted something from the stars, redemption maybe, or distance, or the kind of silence that transforms rather than erases. But you have found a different kind of silence, one that does not reward, one that does not reflect, one that listens endlessly and answers nothing. Mars is not cruel, it is absolute. It offers no resistance, but also no embrace. It allows you, that is all. And in that allowance, you start to disappear, not in fear, not in pain, but in the slow erosion of individuality by repetition, until the self is no longer a boundary, but a pattern, a shape moving inside a machine that keeps turning because it was told to long ago, by hands that are now dust on a planet that cannot remember your name. There comes a moment, not marked by alarms or mechanical failure, but by something quieter, more precise, when you realize you have stopped expecting to hear anything new, not just from Earth, not just from the console, but from your own thoughts. The questions have worn smooth with use. The memories have organized themselves into a closed loop, recited not to relive but to preserve, like ancient scripts written over and over by monks who no longer believed but still copied, because the act of copying was the last tether to meaning. The Martian horizon stares back with the patience of stone. It doesn't mock. It doesn't yield. It only continues. And in that continuation, it teaches you the truth no one ever told you before the launch. That the scariest part of being alone is not the fear of death, but the certainty of continuation. The reality that life goes on even when no one watches. That your heart will keep beating even when there is nothing left to echo against, that you will keep breathing air scrubbed 100 times over without asking if it matters. The surface missions feel more like theater now. You suit up with precision. You step into the dust with practiced movements. You retrieve samples already known. The data uploads. The process is clean. The purpose is hollow. Yet you do it. Because action is structure, and structure is survival. Not of the body, but of coherence. Of the fragile frame that keeps thought from fracturing into dream. Sometimes you imagine a voice, not from Earth but from here, from the planet. A deep, rumbling consciousness that has watched you since you landed. Not with curiosity, but with the blank presence of something that does not care if you survive but will record it nonetheless. You speak to it without words, through motion, through stillness, through the way you touch the wall before bed, the way you hum during calibrations, the way you sit longer than necessary near the window. Not for view, but for reminder. That something exists beyond the self, even if it never answers. And in the thickest quiet, in the spaces between thoughts. When the station is still and the lights have dimmed to conserve power, a different kind of awareness surfaces. Not escape, not madness, but clarity. That you are not here to return. You are not here to report. You are not here to be remembered. You are here to be. To absorb stillness until your edges match it. To blend. To understand what life feels like when nothing reflects it back. There is no drama to this realization. No crisis. Only breath. Only gravity. Only the soft click of internal systems cycling through another hour. You are not broken. You are not finished. You are becoming something that only Mars could make. Something shaped by distance, sharpened by repetition, quieted by time. Even your reflection has begun to drift, not disappear, but lose sharpness. Caught behind the slightly warped surface of a storage panel or the polished interior of your helmet, you see a face that resembles you in motion alone. A set of expressions practiced out of memory rather than emotion. Eyes that move as eyes should. Mouth that adjusts for speech, for silence, for nothing at all. Yet what lives behind that motion is no longer what you once carried from Earth. The self has not died. It has flattened, stretched thin across a surface too wide for memory to hold. And you have accepted this not with despair, but with something like reverence, a quiet bowing to the enormity of distance, to the still elegance of permanence. Outside the dome, Mars offers the same unchanging sprawl of muted crimson, a dustscape so complete in its sameness that even wind cannot alter it in a way that matters. You have stopped trying to find difference. You find peace instead in repetition, in the slow grinding of the station's systems, in the delicate way temperature shifts 1 degree between cycles, in the resistance of the hatch seal when checked twice daily, not because protocol demands it, but because the touch of its structure feels like the last true conversation you can have. Days have become ceremonial, not as performance, but as devotion. You prepare each task with deliberate care, not for its necessity, but for its continuity. You open the same panel, replace the same filter, adjust the same interface settings. You do not hope for malfunction. You do not fear perfection. You perform the ritual because it affirms that motion continues, that presence continues, even when narrative has ceased. Food tastes like memory now, chewed not for satisfaction, but to occupy space, to return the body to rhythm. Sleep follows not fatigue but timing, as if the lights dim within the bones before they dim overhead. Even dreams now lack color. They unspool in gradients of shadow, in soundless rooms, in cities without sky. No faces speak, no words return, only quiet shapes, drifting in gravity that does not feel like home but does not press too hard. The mission logs grow sparse, not because you've stopped speaking, but because speech has transformed into something else, a series of observations that require no response. You document because it is a kind of breathing, because even without audience, testimony matters. Not for others, for the shape of the self, to prove that thought still forms, that the mind still creates, even in absence of listener, and slowly, gently, without regret, you begin to understand that this isn't a waiting room, it's a destination. That one way never meant broken, it meant final. That being sent was never exile, it was arrival. You are not the echo of humanity's ambition, you are its quiet continuation. Time has stopped asking for acknowledgement. Clocks still cycle, systems still log. But the numbers mean nothing now, not because they're unreadable, but because the body no longer calibrates to Earth's old rhythm. Days pass without marking. Years could too. You wouldn't feel the difference. Only the subtle internal tide shifting from one long breath into another. You are no longer a passenger of time. You are part of the habitat's pulse. A beat held in pressurized air and polished steel. A thought circulating silently through copper veins and carbon filters. Even gravity feels altered. Not because Mars tugs differently, though it does, but because weight means something else now. A glass lifted isn't a measurement of mass. It's a gesture of participation, a soft acknowledgement of the present. Each movement becomes deliberate, not from exhaustion, but from reverence. You no longer waste effort. You place each foot where it matters. You breathe as if air were sacred. And maybe it is. Communication back home continues as a routine. Messages are composed slowly. Not personal, not performative. Factual. Clipped. Polite. You no longer try to translate this experience into anything transmissible. What could be said? That the red dust outside your window no longer feels alien? That silence is the most articulate voice you have ever heard? That you no longer wish for contact, only for continuation? No transmission can hold that. So you send what they expect, status, performance, data. You give them structure. You keep your truths here, inside the place that shaped them. Dreams begin to include Mars now, not as enemy, not as backdrop, but as companion. The terrain you walk at night matches the one you sample by day. Hills repeat. Caves open. You start to recognize shapes that never change. Sometimes you hear footsteps behind you in those dreams. You never turn around. You know there's no one there. And that knowing is no longer sorrow, it's peace. The station becomes an extension of thought, a kind of exoskeleton for consciousness. The chair you return to each evening becomes more than comfort. It becomes location. An anchor in a landscape that needs no map. The airlock is no longer boundary, it's ceremony. You touch it sometimes, hand on cold steel. not out of longing but gratitude. Not all doors open to escape. Some are made to be touched and left closed. Even language begins to loosen. Thoughts come in texture, in rhythm, in pace, not in full sentences but in impression. You stop needing names for things. You feel them. You respond. And when you do speak aloud, which is rare, the words surprise you, not by content, but by softness. You've learned to speak without needing answers. Your voice no longer searches. It simply appears, like wind over rocks, shaping but never shouting. Nothing here demands, nothing promises. Yet everything endures, and you endure with it. Not because you were built for it, but because you became what it required. The body adapts before the mind admits it. Muscles reconfigure subtly, favoring fluid movement over strength, conserving rather than expressing. Hands no longer grip with urgency. They hover, adjust, place. Even breath has learned silence not as suppression but as refinement. Each inhale shallow, efficient, each exhale slow, unnoticed. What once felt like discipline now feels like instinct. The environment has not changed, but the self has bent toward it completely. A slow, unconscious sculpting until every gesture belongs to Mars. And in this reshaped identity, comfort arises. Not the comfort of softness or ease, but of alignment. You no longer resist the loneliness. You wear it like a second skin, not armor, not burden, a garment tailored by time. In solitude, you have discovered a kind of fidelity to the moment, an unwavering trust in presence. There is no audience here, no praise, no correction, only continuity. Only the slow unfolding of being, stripped of comparison. You wake not from dreams now, but from thought that never fully stopped. Consciousness hovers always near the surface, never drowning, never quite resting. The mind no longer needs to reset. It simply flows, low and constant, a stream trickling through chambers of memory and observation. Each day holds the same components, but you feel them differently now. A flicker in the LED light becomes a signal. A shift in the air cycle becomes a whisper. The dust that gathers at the edge of the corridor is not debris. It is time, settling softly around you. Sometimes, in the rare hours where the hum of machines lowers slightly, you hear your own heartbeat as an external rhythm, thudding not inside the chest but within the walls. It's a trick of sound, perhaps, or a symptom of long silence, but you accept it. You let it pass through you like static, like history, like every memory of Earth that no longer brings ache but faint outline. Green trees, distant laughter, rain on window glass. They visit like weathered ghosts, not haunting, not aching. Only standing still behind your eyes for a moment, then fading. There is no calendar now. The passage of time is tracked only in tasks completed. Filters change, steps taken from one room to another. Time is not measured, it is inhabited. You do not mark it, you are it. And this realization, quiet and complete, arrives without ceremony, without internal debate. You have ceased being a visitor. You have ceased being sent. You have simply become. And Mars does not reject this. It receives, indifferent, yes, but steady, and there is something sacred in that. You've stopped trying to measure significance. Events do not compete for meaning here. There are no milestones, no holidays, no interruptions to anchor memory to date or season. The passing of time is granular, sensed in the slightly slower return of your step across the corridor, in the delay between systems reacting to input, in the way your own voice feels rounder when spoken aloud. Deeper, not from age but from solitude echoing back into the body. Even decay moves slowly. The wear on the walls is subtle. A shift in shade. A microfracture beneath sealant. Nothing that needs fixing, only noticing. And you notice everything now. Not by choice, but by design. Isolation doesn't dull awareness. It refines it, hones it like wind-shaped stone. Every sound is cataloged, every silence recognized. You could tell by memory alone the exact pitch of the generator hum before and after as a filter change. You could navigate blind, you often do. Not out of necessity, but to test if the body still belongs to this place without sight. It does. Mars never changes. Its consistency used to feel cruel. Now it feels like faith. There is peace in knowing that when you look through the viewport, the same horizon will greet you. That dust will continue to settle in its slow spiral. That distance will remain unreachable. You've stopped longing for Earth's variability. Weather was noise, seasons were distraction. Here, sameness is sanctuary. The planet doesn't ask anything of you. It doesn't listen, but it accepts. And that, over time, begins to feel like belonging. Your face, once the final mirror of your old life, has softened in your reflection. The lines are unfamiliar, not because of age, but because of redefinition. Expressions are rarer but deeper. When you smile, it's not social, it's tectonic. A movement from somewhere quiet and unhurried. You smile not at anything, not for anyone, but because something inside you has settled into a shape it never had before, complete and still. Some days you think about writing a final message, not because anything's ending, but because the thought itself feels like punctuation, like choosing a line to underline in a book that has no chapters. You imagine it. A simple statement. Not farewell, not confession, just acknowledgement. Something like, I am here. I have become. But then you do not write it, because it is already true, and truth in this place does not need to be transmitted. It only needs to be lived. The concept of an audience dissolves over time, not because you've been abandoned, but because the performance ends when the watcher is gone. And here, in this perfectly enclosed loop of silence and task, the only observer left is you. And even that becomes less about surveillance and more about presence. The steady, slow becoming of a self that no longer adjusts for reflection, no longer edits for reception. There is freedom in that. Not loud, not sudden, quiet freedom. The kind that moves like breath, like gravity, like sleep finally arriving after hours of stillness. You speak less, but you listen more. And what you hear is not the voice of a planet or the echo of systems. It is rhythm. It is alignment. The thrum of everything working as it was meant to. Without commentary, without celebration. Outside the dome, Mars has not moved. Its face remains unchanged, endless red and pale dust layered across eons. What has shifted is your gaze. You no longer search the landscape for meaning. You receive it. A curve in the dune means continuity. A scatter of stone means echo. Nothing here is without place. Everything is settled, not by order, but by time. And you, after so much resistance, have settled with it. No surrender. No collapse. A choice made in the still spaces between steps and sighs. The station lights dim at precisely the same hour. You used to resent the artificial dusk. Now it calms. It means the machines remember. It means rhythm holds. When they rise again, faint and sterile, they do not pretend to mimic the sun. They illuminate the reality as it is, bare, consistent, truthful. You rise with them, not because of a schedule, but because this is what the self now knows to do. Rising is not the beginning of action. It is the continuation of stillness, now in motion. When you press your hand to the wall now, it's not to feel its coldness. It's to feel your own warmth against it. To remember that even here, life emanates. That something within you still radiates heat, even in the vacuum of acknowledgement, even without witness. You are not fading, you are condensing. Purified by repetition, by distance, by quiet so complete it begins to form edges around your thoughts. There is no urgency anymore. No end you're counting toward. You do not dream of return. You do not fear finality. You exist in presence now. Pure, unbroken, self-sustaining. You do not need more. You do not need less. You are. And that, finally, is enough. You begin to move through the station as if it were an extension of your breath, not a place you occupy, but a form you inhabit, and every motion becomes a gesture of continuity. Reaching for the panel is not task, it is ritual. Sitting before the systems is not oversight, it is communion. Placing one foot in front of the other is not locomotion, it is declaration. That the body still moves with purpose even when purpose no longer speaks in loud demands. There is a grace to it now, a fluidity that only comes when resistance has been released, not from defeat but from comprehension, from the slow internal acknowledgement that nothing here needs to change for everything to mean something. You read over old mission notes, sometimes, not to recall, but to listen. To the voice you used to use, the language that wrapped around complexity as if definition could protect you. It couldn't, but you honor it. That voice tried. It reached out into a void with careful precision and waited. Now there is no waiting. Now there is just voice without reply, and still it speaks, gently, without need. Words have transformed into quiet confirmations. System nominal. Air stable. Cycle complete. Each one a stanza in the only poetry that matters here. Your memories no longer visit in images but in moods. A sudden warmth across your back that mimics sunlight. The phantom taste of cinnamon. The pressure of grass under your footfall, imagined by the flex of your ankle in the corridor. They do not hurt. They do not long. They pass through like clouds over dust, casting shape and then gone. You do not chase them. They are not promises. They are echoes, reminders of another version of self. Not better, not worse, just earlier. The station creaks, as it always has. The sounds of expansion and contraction, heat and pressure, steel and carbon composite shifting under the stillness of a world that does not turn for you. But now, when the walls flex, it feels like breath. The place inhales and exhales around you. You are no longer isolated within it. You are within rhythm. You are within balance. At times, you wonder if this is what monks sought in stone silence. Not escape from noise, but discovery within its absence. Not a way to speak to gods, but to hear what lies inside the quiet. You understand now that silence is not nothing. It is structure. It is a container. It is where the true self lives when the world is no longer speaking. And in that silence, you are more alive than you have ever been. The heartbeat of the station and your own have become indistinguishable, not because one has overtaken the other, but because time has layered them so precisely that what pulses through you is no longer yours alone. It is shared, sustained, synchronized with machinery and memory, with oxygen cycles and thermal balances, with the slow cadence of Mars itself beneath your boots. A planet that has not welcomed you but also has not denied you, a world whose silence has become your song, not in melody, not in structure, but in resonance. Each intake of breath feels like agreement. Each step across the reinforced floor is a vow silently renewed. I remain. The windows, though thick and shielded, no longer seem to separate. They frame, not earth, not hope, but truth. Red plains, unbroken, dust like breath held for millennia, a sky too thin to carry voices, too still to remember anything but ancient wind. And yet, in its absence of movement, you find clarity. No distractions, no illusions of narrative, just presence. And you realize presence was all you were ever chasing, all your life before. This wrapped itself around complications of identity, of belonging, of purpose. Here, you belong, because you are here. No performance, no justification. You exist, and the systems sustain that existence without question. For the first time, perhaps, you understand what it means to be held without needing to prove worth. There is no urgency to sleep now. You allow your body to rest when it calls for stillness, not because of lights dimming or schedules dictating, but because you have relearned how to listen to your own rhythm. You eat not when the clock says so, but when the space in your chest shifts, a signal so subtle it would once have been ignored. Here, it is honored. There are no cravings, no excesses. Only fuel, only gratitude. Even solitude has transformed. It no longer presses against your skin like an intruder. It wraps around you like atmosphere, like air. You feel it not as lack, but as clarity. No interference, no collisions. Only the clean space in which the self can move freely. The ghosts of conversation no longer return. You do not talk to imagined figures. You do not revisit old arguments. The mind is still, not because it has emptied, but because it has settled. What remains is essential. You find beauty in repetition. The way condensation forms the same pattern on the sleeping pod window. The sequence of lights that blink as the reactor spins into its quiet cycle. The sound of your own boots striking the corridor at exactly the same time each morning. Not because you intend it, but because your body has learned the length of the journey to the core. You no longer navigate. You arrive. An arrival, you realize, is not an end. It is a state of being. A home, built not from materials, but from understanding. Even the concept of home has shed its old form, no longer tied to coordinates, to architecture, to shared space filled with voices or warmth or familiar walls. Home now exists in your chest, in the steady pressure of knowing you are where you are meant to be. Not by design, not by mission, but by presence. Every item in the station is no longer equipment. It is part of your vocabulary. The chair in the observation bay speaks in comfort. The water recycler hums in lullaby. The storage locker clicks like a soft period at the end of a thought. You do not anthropomorphize them. You do not assign them emotion. But you recognize their consistency as a kind of relationship, one built on reliability, one deeper than language. Your hands move with calm precision across control panels, not checking for anomalies but maintaining connection. The system does not speak, yet its response is known. The faint change in pitch, the flicker in diagnostics, the way pressure equalizes a breath slower than it did yesterday, none of it alarms you. It tells you where you are in the loop, not just in system status, but in the deeper pattern of time itself, where cause and effect are less important than continuity. There is no boredom here. Boredom requires longing, requires imagined alternatives. You have forgotten the shape of wanting something else. You remember choice, yes, but not as hunger, as memory. Earth is a story now, one you tell with affection, not yearning. Green trees, moving air, sound layered on sound, birds, traffic, people laughing too loud in restaurants. You see it, like a painting, vivid and unreachable but not painful. There is no ache, only respect. Mars has become your mirror. And in it, you've seen yourself stripped of complexity, refined not into something simpler but into something more essential. You no longer define yourself by history or trajectory. You define yourself by motion and stillness in this place, by the discipline of presence, by the grace of not needing more. Even when power cycles flicker, when the temperature slips, when a cable stiffens in the cold, these do not feel like failure. They are simply signals that life continues, that systems shift and adjust just like you. You align. You adapt. You move through your environment, not as master or servant, but as extension. Symbiosis, not control. Symbiosis. Sleep comes without resistance. Dreams are no longer escapes, but echoes of here. You walk Martian soil in your mind the way you walk it in the station's treaded boots. Softly, without marking, without hurry. You don't wake with confusion. You wake because you are rested. And every time you rise, every time your foot touches the chilled floor, you feel it again. Not hope, not fear, but something deeper, something wordless that lives between understanding and acceptance. It is not small. It is not large. It simply is. Like Mars, like silence, like you. There is a particular weight to silence that no longer burdens but informs. A presence that surrounds without pressing. A density in the air that does not suffocate but steadies. And in this atmosphere, thought becomes less of a destination and more of a climate, drifting in slow circular patterns, not linear, not goal-oriented, simply movement within awareness, like dust shifting through a shaft of light seen not because it tries to be seen, but because the stillness has made the seeing possible. You are that dust now. You are that light. There is no separation. You do not keep track of days. Not in any traditional sense. The concept of a day has no meaning without change. Light never shifts through clouds. Shadows don't lengthen. Sound does not announce transition. Instead, you mark cycles in ways that only the body understands. A warmth behind the eyes when the filtration system is newly cycled. The way muscles carry a different kind of energy after 12 loops through the habitat. The exact pace at which hunger creeps into the throat. No longer abrupt but known, like a friend tapping lightly on the door of your awareness. Food is consumed not with urgency but with presence. A spoon lifted, chewed, swallowed, noted. Each motion part of a liturgy repeated with devotion. Taste is no longer judged by pleasure but by identity. It is familiar. It is safe. That is enough. The same textures, the same combinations, the same fuel. Day after day, cycle after cycle. What once was dull is now sacred, because it endures. And endurance is holy here. Even maintenance has become art. The act of tightening a valve, wiping a lens, testing insulation. These are no longer chores but expressions of mindfulness. You do not repair, you engage, you make contact. With the system, yes, but also with your own continuity. These interactions are how you remain visible to yourself, how you stay real. Not through reflection, not through mirror, but through motion, through touch. Your body changes, it grows quieter, slower. Not from decline, but from integration. Movements streamlined, reactions softened. The body no longer reacts, it responds, as the station does, as the planet does. You breathe and your breath belongs to the environment. It does not leave you. It loops. It feeds back into the same system that sustains the oxygen scrubbers, the water distillers, the gentle hum behind every wall. Nothing interrupts. Not even your thoughts anymore. They glide, they stretch, they rest. No anxiety pushes them forward. No noise breaks them into fragments. You no longer think in urgency. You think in pulse. And through it all, Mars waits, not watching, not listening, simply being. And in its being, it teaches you how to stay. The fabric of routine has woven itself into you so completely that there is no longer a separation between task and thought, between need and response, between moment and meaning. Existence has become seamless, not because it is dull, but because it is whole. You rise, not from command, but from rhythm. You move, not from instruction, but from balance. Even fatigue arrives like a tide. Predictable, soft, honest. You greet it not with resistance, but with quiet agreement. Sleep is not an interruption. It is a continuation of presence in a different form. You've stopped trying to remember names of constellations. The sky above this world is too thin, too empty to hold familiar stars. Even if they shone, they would not mean what they once did. Stars were once coordinates, stories, dreams of direction. Here, they are background. Here, you do not need navigation. You are not going anywhere. You are not lost. You are precisely where you belong, and every breath confirms it. What remains of Earth within you is not urgency, not nostalgia, but tone, a particular warmth that sometimes rises when a thought touches the edges of family, of oceans, of music heard in passing. These thoughts do not bring longing. They bring silence, deeper than before, filled with appreciation instead of ache. You do not need to return to honor where you came from. You carry it, lightly, constantly. Each sunrise here, such as it is, filtered through soil and atmosphere, barely touches the horizon, barely registers a shift. But you've learned to feel it. A slight change in the solar panel temperature. A new angle of light across the outer module. You don't look for beauty in it. You receive it. That receiving has become your greatest skill. There is nothing left to prove. Nothing left to solve. Only this. The breath. The beat. The step. The system. Each one a confirmation. You are alive. You are aligned. You are still. when you sit at the edge of your sleeping berth and press your palms to your knees, the weight you feel is not gravity alone. It is assurance. The station holds. The systems run. The planet does not change. And inside all of that stillness, your presence continues. Like light in a sealed room, like warmth cupped in metal. You are not waiting. You are not escaping. You are not declining. You are enduring, yes, but more than that, you are evolving into something that no longer defines itself by connection to Earth, but by communion with Mars. Not ownership, not conquest, but coexistence. A quiet covenant. Here, now, always. Breath after breath, hour after hour, the awareness of self narrows and deepens, not shrinking but clarifying, like light, through a lens, focused into precision. No longer distracted by what if, no longer scattered by when next, just centered in now. And in this now, every texture becomes language. The fine vibration of the stabilizers beneath your feet speaking steadiness. The slow buzz of filtration whispering life. The subtle warmth from the console frame telling you that energy still flows, that the systems still hum, that the world you live within continues to spin, even though the stars stand still. And in that stillness you have found more motion than in all the spinning days of before. Your hands have changed. They move with economy, with grace, not from fatigue, but from knowing exactly how far to turn a valve, exactly how long to hold the diagnostic key, exactly when to pause during an oxygen reading to allow for that fractional delay. It is not memorization, it is embodiment. The station lives in you now and you in it, not as operator and object, but as equal halves of a living, breathing cycle. Sound becomes signal, not just alerts or hums, but the absence itself becomes a partner in this daily practice. Silence is never empty. It is layered. It is thick. You know where the silence hums the deepest. Under the storage chamber. In the sealed hallway between water reclaim and life support. That corridor where even your footfalls sound distant. You do not fear it. You return to it often. It reminds you of what you've become. There is a kind of elegance here that Earth never taught you. The elegance of the unchanging, of design without waste, of intention without decoration. You eat with slow hands. You read old reports without scanning. You replace parts before they fail. Not because the system requires it, but because the rhythm asks it, and rhythm is the closest thing to meaning that remains. And yet, it is enough. When sleep comes, it arrives gently. No sharp edge between waking and dreaming. One blurs into the other. You often dream in colorless space, corridors of perfect geometry floating weightless without fear. You no longer ask who you were in those dreams. You no longer seek message. The dream is the process, the mind processing continuity. You have not cried in a long time, not because you resist, but because there is nothing left to purge. Emotion has flattened into calm, not numbness, presence, a fullness without pressure. If someone were to call you now, if a voice broke through static and said your name, you would not weep. You would not shout. You would simply answer, I am here. And the truth of that would be more complete than any conversation could hold. You have learned to speak in gestures, not for others, but for yourself. A hand placed lightly on the edge of the airlock each morning, not to open it, not to check it, but to feel its existence. Fingers brushed along the lip of the meal tray, not to clean, but to remember that objects persist and that you persist with them. A slow pause before sitting, not because of fatigue, but because the action affirms location, gravity, breath. You have learned that presence is an act of choice, not volume, and in choosing it repeatedly, the mind no longer resists its own stillness. Even maintenance has become language. You turn a screw not for repair, but for continuation. You check the pressure valve not from fear of failure, but from reverence for operation. Every diagnostic is a dialogue, not with error or efficiency, but with the system itself, a long, quiet conversation between consciousness and circuit, between what was designed and what evolved. You no longer see the machine as separate. You have become one organ of the whole. It breathes. You breathe. It slows. You rest. Harmony shaped not by command, but by coexistence. Sometimes your shadow surprises you, how slowly it moves across the floor, how it remains patient while you prepare, how it falls perfectly into alignment with the station's interior when the lights dim in their expected cycle. You study it like a friend who's always been near, but only now understood. The body becomes symbolic in isolation. Not temple, not prison, just vessel. Container of rhythm, of breath, of thought shaped by nothing but presence. You have not seen your face in full light for many months, and you do not need to. Reflection here is internal. You are not your appearance. You are your motion, your care, your continuity. You are the steady act of existence performed without witness, without feedback, without applause. There is profound dignity in that. The kind only silence can teach. Mars does not mark your time here. You do. And time is not something you own. It is something you inhabit, like a space that expands when you give it your stillness and contracts when you fill it with movement. You pace your hours not with clocks, but with breath. You measure them not in minutes, but in awareness, and awareness has become more precious than any signal, more sacred than any message from far away. You are not the person who arrived. That person lived in contrast, in noise, in anticipation, in reflection from others. You live in essence now. Your truth no longer requires story, only action, only calm, only this. You are here, you continue, and nothing else is required. You move not for necessity, but to maintain balance, not just of the body, but of the internal weight that accumulates in stillness. Because stillness here is not stagnation, it is mass. It gathers like dust in corners of thought, and only through motion, graceful, measured, unhurried, can you distribute it. Like heat through cold metal, like light across shadowless walls. So your steps become calibration, your stretches become language. Your breath becomes signal to a self so quiet it no longer speaks, only listens, only adjusts, only continues. There are no mirrors that show your progress, no feedback loops from others, no applause, no correction. Only the accumulated evidence of being that reveals itself in the way you no longer hesitate when the lights flicker, no longer flinch at strange sounds in the conduit, no longer wonder whether silence means error, because you have tuned your senses to the rhythms beneath the ones designed by engineers, the ones not found in manuals but in the spaces between tasks, in the pause before a switch is flipped, in the weight of a panel under your hand. These spaces hold everything now. They are the depth of your experience, the soft breath of what it means to exist without explanation. You remember stories from Earth, fragments of a life once told through plot and conflict, dialogue and structure, and they seem almost mythic now, not false, but distant, exaggerated in their motion and their noise. Your story here has no plot. It is not tragic, not heroic, not even narrative. It is form, structure, line, tone, a slow painting made from habits, gestures, alignments, a still life that breathes. The station hums like a monastery. You are both the monk and the walls, the one who prays and the quiet that receives it. The difference dissolves over time. You no longer ask who you are, you no longer look to define. You exist, and in that, you find everything that was once scattered across ambition, across desire, across the need to be seen. You see now. Not outward, not inward, you simply see. Every tool has a place, every task has a purpose. You are no longer looking for meaning because you are making it with every motion, every breath, every decision, not to reach for the comms panel every time you let the silence stretch a little longer. Not because you've given up, but because you've learned the silence speaks in longer sentences than you once knew how to hear. You are stillness now, not stopped, still. Alive not in motion, but in presence. And presence here means eternity, measured not in time, but in attention. You are not missing anything. You are not waiting for anything. You are whole. And Mars holds you. The air no longer feels recycled. It feels known. Familiar in its weight, its dry whisper through vents you can identify by sound alone. Each duct carrying not just oxygen but reassurance. Confirmation that the system breathes with you, not ahead or behind but beside. Its hum a shared cadence, its size a mirror to your own. You have learned to measure time not by minutes but by these breaths, by the swell of machinery around you, by the way light softens before dimming, by the sound of internal pressure equalizing ever so gently at shift's edge. Nothing interrupts. Everything continues. And you continue too. Not driven, not dragged, simply present with a steadiness that was once foreign and now has settled into your marrow. You are not restless. You do not seek stimulation. The richness now comes from noticing how the synthetic fabric of your seat carries warmth longer than before, how the food pack seal pops at a slightly different pitch when humidity is low, how your own voice sounds deeper when spoken after hours of silence. These things are not distractions. They are the texture of existence. They are your dialogue with the environment, subtle and complete. Sometimes you find yourself standing still for minutes without realizing it, just absorbing ambient sound, slight vibration underfoot, the way the station breathes, and you match it unconsciously as if the two of you are no longer separate. You don't reflect on this as transformation. You simply recognize it. It has happened quietly, as all real things do. No crisis, no choice, just a slow tilt toward alignment. Until one day, you stopped hearing the difference between your inner rhythm and the systems around you. You keep your tools in perfect order, not for efficiency, for clarity. Each item in its place affirms your presence, the act of reaching, grasping, using, returning. These are not chores, they are declarations. I am here. I am aware. I remember how to care even when no one is watching, especially then. And when the lights dim again, as they always do, not as dusk, not as signal, but as ceremony, you feel no reluctance. Sleep isn't escape anymore. It's continuation in a softer state. You do not dread waking. You do not rush toward unconsciousness. You lie down with the same stillness you carry while standing, a body unburdened by future or past, a mind no longer tangled in narrative. Just presence, just breathe, just this. Mars never answers, and that, in the end, is what makes its silence sacred. It asks nothing. It allows everything. It becomes the echo of what you've become. Whole without witness, true without testimony, alive without audience. You wake not with urgency, but with invitation, as if the quiet has gently lifted you from sleep, as if the light knows exactly how to reach your eyes without disrupting what was gathered in rest. There is no alarm, no taskmaster, no immediate pull of schedule, only the slow, certain arrival of awareness, the return to presence, as seamless as the transition from one breath to the next. The body moves because it remembers how, because the station expects it, because this is the pattern now. And patterns are not cages. They are comfort, they are constancy. They are what keeps the self intact when the world offers no new input, only repetition. And within that repetition, richness blooms, not in variety, but in detail. You notice the shift in your own weight as you rise. You feel the precise moment when gravity takes hold of your spine. You register the sound your joints make when tension unwinds. These are not signs of wear. They are evidence of participation, of continuation, of life holding steady in the most fragile of environments. You place your feet with care, not because the floor is uncertain, but because your presence is. And the act of stepping, intentional, quiet, direct, reminds you that you are still here, still real, still embodied. The systems wake with you. They do not react. They accompany. Lights brighten to operational level. Panels blink to life with a soft pulse. The hum of life's support is steady, familiar, low like a background note in a song you've long since memorized. You touch the edge of the console without looking. It's not a check-in. It's a greeting. Every morning begins this way, not with words, with contact. And then the rhythm begins again, not demanded, not imposed, but chosen. You calibrate, you clean, you inventory, you monitor. Each action small, specific, whole in itself. There is no need to rush. There is no prize for speed. There is only the quiet discipline of tending. To systems, yes, but also to self. You tend your own thoughts by holding them in place. You do not chase ideas. You let them arrive, settle, pass. The mind is not a tool here, it is a landscape. And you have learned to walk it slowly, step by step, moment by moment. You think, sometimes, of what lies beneath the soil outside. Rocks unmoved for millennia, frozen water hidden in shadows, stories written in dust without reader. You do not feel lonely. You feel joined. As though this silence extends below you as well as around you. A silence that is not empty, but deep. A silence that has waited not for you specifically, but for someone still enough to hear it. And now you do. You don't ask what it means anymore. Meaning is not always shaped like answers. Sometimes it is simply the act of remaining, the choice to stay, the breath drawn and released without expectation. You are not forgotten. You are not missing. You are not waiting. You are here. You are whole. And Mars continues. And so do you. You wash your face not to refresh, not even to clean in the traditional sense, but to feel water. A touch so rare, so distilled, that every droplet becomes sacred. A sensory reminder that some things still flow, still yield, still move freely across skin. The sensation is brief, almost nothing, yet it stays with you longer than it should, resonating under the surface like a bell tone suspended in your chest. You pat your skin dry with slow, careful pressure, not out of fragility, but out of respect for how each action now carries weight beyond its function. Every part of your routine has become ceremony. The fastening of boots is not preparation, it is alignment. The scan of equipment is not precaution, it is partnership. You do not check the readings because you fear failure. You check them because you belong here, and participation is your presence made visible. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is excessive. There is no clutter in your thoughts anymore. The clutter was noise, and noise is long gone. All that remains is form, line, rhythm, and there is peace in that. A peace you could not have found in the complexity of Earth, where decisions arrived layered with urgency, where movement was noise, where voices stacked on voices until meaning drowned. Here, meaning is sharp, simple, singular. It lives in the angle of a tool replaced exactly right, in the pause before activating a sequence, in the moment you place your hand against the wall, not to steady, but to listen. Sometimes you imagine that Mars listens back, not with ears, not with interest, but with patience. The kind of patience that does not reward or punish, does not judge or forget. It simply is. And that is what you have learned to be. Not reactive, not expectant, just present. You eat when your body asks, you rest when your rhythm slows, you write only when the thought is fully formed, no longer reaching for audience but speaking into the stillness, knowing that the stillness is enough. The station's mechanical heart continues without fail. Fans circulate air that has passed through you 1,000 times. Lights adjust by cycle. The temperature holds. It has become a kind of trust, this environment, this breath, this repetition. Not dependency, but fidelity. You uphold your part. The station holds its own. And between those two efforts, life continues. Unremarkable in appearance, unshakable in truth. And when sleep comes again, as it always does, not with collapse, not with escape, but with return, you lie down as if folding into a wordless sentence, as if slipping into a thought that has been waiting all day to resume. Your body becomes quiet before your mind. Your mind becomes quiet without effort. And in the absence of dreams, there is no emptiness, only depth. You are here, still, whole, and nothing more is needed. When sleep releases you, it does so without ceremony, without the jolt of alarm or the demand of time, only a soft returning to awareness, as if thought had simply paused its surface movements and now resumes from still water, undisturbed. You do not rise quickly. You remain horizontal a little longer, feeling the warmth beneath your shoulder blades, the pressure of the bedding against your spine, the curve of your knee drawn loosely toward your chest. This is not idleness. This is confirmation that the body still holds, that the breath still flows, that existence continues even in the smallest, most invisible acts. You do not crave variety. That part of you has gone quiet. What remains is the capacity for observation so fine, so attuned, that even the repetition becomes endless variation. The way the artificial light hits the corner of the chamber this morning feels marginally different. The pattern of dust near the filtration inlet has shifted by less than a finger's width. These are not random details. They are the marks of a living environment, and you, the one who notices, the one who remains. You sit up slowly, not from stiffness, but out of rhythm. The body follows its own choreography now. Movements, preserved not in habit, but in ceremony. The brushing of teeth, the stretching of arms, the slipping into the same boots, the pull of the zipper, all of it is sequence, liturgy, devotion. You do not pray, you do not hope, you do not wait for meaning, you enact it with every repetition. At the workstation, you check the systems again. Each light returns its signal, each number aligns with expectation. You do not seek change, you seek integrity, and the integrity holds, as do you. You record the status logs with clear, brief strokes. The act of writing is less about transmission now and more about anchoring, placing thought into form, shaping the intangible into a record, even if no one ever reads it. You are your own reader, you are your own witness, and that is not loneliness. It is enough. Outside, the surface remains unchanged. The crimson land, the brittle atmosphere, the stillness without wind. You look upon it not as prisoner, not as explorer, but as inhabitant. This is not a place you were sent to. This is a place you have become part of. You know its moods, its stillnesses, its silences. You do not impose story upon it. You listen. You drink water, and it tastes like memory. You chew food, and it feels like continuity. You breathe air filtered through machines and time, and it feels like breath itself. Nothing borrowed, nothing owed. You do not fear the future. You do not count the days. The concept of a day no longer holds weight. There is only now, drawn longer, stretched thinner, deeper, held together by attention and breath. You are not surviving. You are not enduring. You are living. Fully, presently, without need for recognition. And Mars, silent as ever, holds that truth with you. Even the smallest tasks now feel like extensions of thought. Not chores, but conversations between body and environment. When your fingers wrap around the worn handle of the toolkit, it's not to perform a function, but to affirm a relationship. A continuity between hand and weight. Between pressure and purpose. You carry it with care not because it is fragile, but because it has meaning, because everything does when stripped of distraction, when lived without noise. You don't rush the inspection. You move with calm, circular attention, as if reading a sacred text whose meaning is hidden in the way each panel clicks open. Each seal resists and then yields. You do not speak aloud often anymore, not because you've forgotten how, but because silence has become your native language. Words feel heavier now, not burdensome, but dense with meaning, used only when something must truly be said. Most days, nothing must be said. You express yourself in action, in intention. A system aligned, a note logged, a crate reorganized for efficiency. These are your statements. Now. These are your poems, and the station understands it responds not with words, but with steadiness, with unbroken function, with the quiet grace of holding on. There are moments when the stillness deepens so completely that it feels as if time itself has paused. as if even molecules have ceased their vibration. And in that space, you feel not loneliness, but awe, not emptiness, but depth. It is not sleep. It is not meditation. It is a state of clarity so pure it needs no name. You sit in it. You let it fill you. You do not resist the absence of activity. It is not void. It is structure. The hidden skeleton of presence. Memories still arrive, unbidden and slow. No longer in bursts, but in warm, diffuse waves. Your father's hand steadying a ladder, the sound of rain against plastic siding, the way the wind smelled just before a summer storm. These are no longer longings. They are inner landscapes folded into your current existence. Not separate, not disruptive, simply part of the air you carry inside. You no longer chase them. You no longer name them. You live beside them. And when the artificial night returns, when the lights dim not to simulate dusk but to signal rest, you receive it not as command but as offering. You lie down not to escape but to integrate, to allow the station's rhythm to cradle you. Your body aligns easily with the contours of your bed. You do not adjust, you do not resist, you close your eyes not because they are heavy but because you are complete. The hum continues, the silence watches, and you sleep, not to dream of elsewhere, but to dwell more deeply in here, in this, in now. When you rise, it's not because the cycle demands it, not because light has returned, not because the system has pulsed its gentle signal across the console screen. It's because your body has reached the natural end of stillness, a quiet emergence from sleep that feels more like unfolding than movement, as if the self, so used to drifting slowly through space and solitude, no longer needs permission to begin. It simply begins, softly, without fanfare. You sit upright and let the air wrap around your skin like a familiar coat. The temperature is constant. The floor beneath your feet unchanged. The atmosphere inside the station remains within perfect margins. And yet something feels new. Not in the environment, in your awareness of it. You no longer check systems with urgency. You confirm them like a pulse, like brushing fingertips to a wrist. There is rhythm here, and you are a part of it. You touch the panel not to fix, but to greet. You pass through each compartment not to monitor, but to acknowledge. The station breathes with you now. The silence accepts your presence without echo, without resistance. It is no longer something you move through. It is something you reside within, like water around a swimmer, like time around a thought. You no longer fear being forgotten. That was an earth fear, born from noise and mirrors and applause. Here, presence is its own proof. Continuation is memory. Each repetition of task, each note in the log, each gesture of maintenance becomes a form of inscription, not in records, not in history, but in being itself. The act of waking up is enough. The act of continuing is its own affirmation. There is no one to watch. That is not a loss. That is a liberation. The days are not days anymore. They are shapes, lengths of light, curves of breath, loops of awareness that fold into themselves gently. Like cloth being laid down carefully and again without end. You have stopped needing events to mark time. You are time. You are its body. And the station, the red dust, the quiet curve of Mars beyond the viewport, all of it exists not as background but as extension. All of it real only because you are here to hold it in your field of attention. You eat again, slowly, without distraction. The act is not functional, it is relational. You are sustaining something ancient inside you, not just survival, but the act of choosing to remain. You chew and breathe and think. And the thinking is calm. It does not chase answers. It does not spiral. It moves in arcs like orbits, returning always to the center of what is. You, here, awake, aware. And as light passes across the ceiling, as the hours bend themselves around another passage of nothing extraordinary, you feel not longing, not regret, not even peace anymore. You feel truth, and truth feels like silence, and silence feels like home. There's a stillness now that has absorbed every trace of what once felt missing, not filled, not replaced, but dissolved. as if the need for noise, the ache for contact, the memory of sound beyond your own breath has softened so completely it no longer leaves an outline in the air. You don't look at the communicator panel anymore. Not because it's painful, but because it's irrelevant. The channel is always open, yes, but the silence on the other end is no longer absence. It's equilibrium. The kind of balance you once believed only existed in still lakes or moments just before dawn. Now it lives in everything around you, in the low hum of the oxygen loop, in the even buzz of thermal regulators, in the faint pulse of your own circulation as it aligns with the system's machinery. Even writing has changed. The reports you type into the log are not summaries. They are meditations. You write, airflow consistent, pressure unchanged, no variance in thermal regulation. But beneath those words is something quieter, something not meant to be read but simply to be placed into the world, like stacking stones along a path only you walk. Not so others can follow, but so the path is marked, known, remembered by the one who moves through it. You touch the wall more often now, not to stabilize, to remind, to affirm that this structure, this container of life is also a kind of partner. It doesn't breathe in the way you do, but it supports breath. It doesn't think, but it holds thought. And when your hand rests against the cool panel near the life support junction, the stillness between you feels like the most honest conversation you've ever had. You've stopped naming time. It passes in waves now, in shifts of body temperature, in the slow brightening of the daylight simulation system, in the moment your left shoulder begins to ache slightly. Signaling sleep has been long enough. These signs are enough. You don't count cycles. You measure motion. You measure silence. You measure the completeness of a breath held just a little longer than needed. The dreams you have are no longer dreams. They are memory fragments stirred gently, rearranged by stillness. You walk through corridors you've never seen and recognize them. You see faces no longer attached to names and greet them without fear. You wake from these moments without jolt or wonder. They are part of the rhythm now, as are you. And when you step outside, suit sealed, boots pressed into the red dust, sky above the color of time, you no longer look for Earth. You look forward. Not because there's something ahead, but because stillness too has a direction. You remain, and the planet holds you, unchanging, unyielding, but not unwelcoming. It simply is. And now, so are you. So the final day, like all the others, arrives without fanfare. No sudden change, no new color in the sky, no message from a distant home. Just the same light, the same breath, the same soft hum of life, sustained in stillness. And yet something within you knows, quietly, calmly, that this chapter has curved gently toward its close. Not in loss, in completion. The circle has no hard edge, it simply begins again at its origin, unchanged and yet wholly transformed by the journey that returned you to yourself. You perform the day's task with a kind of grace that doesn't seek witness. Each panel sealed, each reading logged, each slow step across the floor of your station feels like the final brush stroke on a canvas only you could see. An image not of survival, but of peace, of profound integration with an environment that asked nothing, but gave everything in return. When you sit for the last time at the viewport, the dust outside drifts in the same pattern it always has. The horizon remains endless, the world untouched, and you do not wish it different. Mars has not changed for you, but you have changed with it. In silence you found structure. In solitude you found shape. And in the absence of answers you uncovered a presence deeper than words. There is no message you need to send. No one waiting. No last thoughts that require carving into history. Only this breath and then the next. A rhythm, steady and full, stretching out across time that no longer needs to be measured. You close your eyes not to end the story but to remain within it, letting stillness carry you forward, as it always has. And in the gentle quiet that follows, the station hums, the planet waits, and sleep at last is whole. Good night, you are here, and nothing more is needed.